이게 이제 맞아요. 자, 저는 이제 영어를
Roll.
Yeah.
Row and arrive.
我
中的的心下我的中，阳当不走的三业水波当小事颠簸，颠簸些我几天颠簸给巴罗有巴罗那颠簸颠簸给中波三业中的给我下下多巴罗超正我这多就是是。关于中国学当时，三天天老公婆都不认得。我的今天的马车接送，的是给我给了家。南大公我就是东风，一些个组织的公婆。然后今天送到老门房，公婆去年给了啥子？昨天我进门家里头，三多让我点了茶。对这些那些我所忘记，家门紧紧接了茶。我出去见见我，他们见别的嘛。从那一天叫做见，提醒见了家。那边个家在我就给人家做的东西，这都的那这就把心就觉了长。昨天这个老样的老王那老那不，天天当我有点点给个老样长。我这样没家心，也我不是错。当给三年用走的，天天上街天忙的，干嘛了人嘛没当，就嘛才把酒。没让我刚听到过，对这些难的得的，早难的他们这些把一我光都来见见他的。嘎达那达七月老出来些，到来着我大修。To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, like one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you, who are wise, then I prostrate. With pure bodies, formed supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, glory to you I prostrate. With the supreme sign, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. You are immaculate, 3 worlds are not. Incomparably wise ones, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you, the one God of sustenance, I prostrate. The purity which makes one free from attachment, the virtue which frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime pure reality, to that sacrifice I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path of liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. The star, a mirage, a flame of the lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the flow of false, and be delivered from the blurred illusion, perturbed by waves of aging, sickness, and death. Janju Samba Samba Chimbo Baba Chere they want you Cherokee Baru the Chimba Samu Chuba Nila number Taji Umbo Mabo the Dala Rashiki Tombara number Tau Tangi Sedan Demba Shari Janju Samba Samba Chimbo Baba Chere they want you Lati Gechemeso Riki Hu Ganlala Cherokee Baru the Chimba Samu Chuba Chuba Tubande Jidar Laparaja Dige me bada janju zemba zemba jembu baba jere se wanju gi sedan demba shara da de bukan dige me zo shari bu rige bu mo kanga achero gi paru du zemba samu che par shembar demba de didar nambar tawar jate bumbo babo de dala ya rashi ge tombar nambar yanda par she su tao su tomba tomba ji su su tomba ni shema Soshemayan. Teshindu Tsorwa Dan Duje Dan Duje Dan Nambar Sheba Nam Tomba O Sharibu Tetar Shudam Se Tomba Sini Meba Ma Yeba Ma Baba Chima Meba Chima Dan Sheba Cheba Meba Kama Meba O Sharibu Teta Wena Tomba Nila Sume Tsorwa Me Dushi Me Dushi Me Nambar Sheba Me Mime Nawa Me Name Cheme Lume Ime Lume Rame Chime Rome examine chu medo nige kame bane ige kame ige number shebe kange barbo yame do mari pa seba me pa kaji sebe barbo yame to Dejendo donga wana kunju wada gopa dala me yeshe me toba me mato pa yame do Jari tumba de da wena janjo zemba nam toba bebe Paro de jemba la tenjin ne de samba jupa me jin rapa me de jinje lo le jinde de ne nyang le be tara jindu du zondu nambar shupe sangye damje kyan shera ke paro de jemba la tene lana me ba yando bo zube chanju tu mambar zo bar sangye zo de da wena shera ke paro de jimbe nga Bo jimbe nga lana me be nga min yamba dan yambe nga Dome tanjiro de shivar shebe ma mizu vena tempar shepar jate shalagi paru de chimpe ma me pataya da gate paragate parasangate buddhisva Shari Bhumbu Chanju Samba Samba Chimbe Teta Shiragi Paru de Chimba Samola Lapar Jau Dingen Dele Shimbe Chanju Samba Samba Chimbu Pava Chene Se Wanchuta Lexo Shejawa Chene Lexo Riki Bhu Tede Shendo Tede Shimbe Chitar Juge Temba Shindu Shiragi Paru de Chimba Samola Chipar Jate Deshin Shabana Kyanje Ramo Chumden Degi Ka sene sedan demba shari tate bodan chanchu semba semba Awa jene se wanchu dan tamche dan dembe forwe de da dan padan me dan hama yindan risa chepe chiden yiran de chumden degi somba lang Thus I have heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajgriha on Vulture's Peak, together with a great assembly of monks and bodhisattvas. At the time, the Blessed One was totally absorbed in the concentration that examines all phenomena, called profound illumination. And at the same time, the noble Avalokita was engaged in the profound practice of the wisdom of beyond, analyzing the five aggregates by nature. And then through the inspiration of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra spoke to the noble Avalokita, the Buddha, saying, how should those who could family learn, who wish to follow the profound practice of the wisdom gone beyond? Thus he spoke, and the Buddha himself of Mahasat replied to the Venerable Shariputra, saying, O Shariputra, whatever son or daughter of good family wishes to follow the profound practice of the wisdom gone beyond, but look at it like this, analyzing the five aggregates by nature empty. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is no other than form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, recognition, karmic formations, and consciousness are all limited. Therefore, Shariputra, all phenomena are empty without characteristics. They are unborn and unceasing. They are neither impure nor free from impurity. They neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no recognition, no karmic formations, no consciousness. There is no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. There are no spheres of the eyes up to no spheres of the mind. There are none of these all the way up to the sphere of mental consciousness. There is no ignorance, nor is there destruction of ignorance. There are none of these all the way up to there is no old age and death, nor is there destruction of old age and death. Thus there is no suffering, no cause of suffering, no cessation of suffering, and no path. There is no wisdom, no attainment, and no knowledge. Therefore, Shariputra, because there is no attainment, all bodhisattvas hold to the wisdom gone beyond, and because there is no obscurity of mind, they have no fear. Passing utterly beyond falsity, they reach beyond the bounds of soul. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times, by relying on the wisdom gone beyond, fully and clearly awaken to unsurpassed, most perfect and complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of the wisdom gone beyond, the mantra of great insight, the unequaled and unsurpassed mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as the truth, for there is no deception. The mantra of the wisdom gone beyond is proclaimed. This is how a bodhisattva Mahasattva should learn the profound wisdom gone beyond. Then the Blessed One arose from that concentration and praised the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, very good, O son of good family. It is exactly like that. The profound wisdom gone beyond should be practiced exactly as you have said. And then the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, the Venerable Shariputra, the noble Avalokiteshvara, all gathering in the world of God, men, anti-gods, and spirits, their hearts full of joy, praise the word of the Blessed One. So ends the noble discourse on the essence of the wisdom gone beyond.
아마도 아니만 하는 진짜 슬람지 봐. 슬람은 진짜 그거다 슬람지 봐서는 그게 아무래도 좀 뭐 이거도 직다 지금 대신 그거 슬람지 봐. 슬람지 봐서는 그래서다 컨설팅 같은 연송이 내내 엔돌이 하네. 그래서 아마 산이 이거 아마도 또 사기 나가게 그래서
It is Sunday now, and we resume the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. These are called stages of a path because there is an order and a sequence, an explanation of that order, and that sequence would then naturally come, wouldn't it? And so it is for one person, they begin in the plight of a hell being and increase their fortunes along the path until eventually achieving the state of awakened Buddhahood. And the path and the way to that destination is the way that great treatise describes.
Oh yeah. 그래도 너무 컨디션은 한번 미직 다른 거 유치니 뭐이나 아니 랑가 되는 거를 대 랑가는 이게 간다 랑가는 그 제시 차번 겨우로 있는지 그런 것도 간다다 나 탐내가 되네지는 뭐보다 선제 탐내기 산이 고마 대화 털도 말로 가고 남제를 뭐 조사될 아니지 아티바 외전에는 이거 지금 걸랑 그래서 말람내는 남나 아니 사다 람게 되니까 그거 뭐 어디 셰고 유리 아니 남제를 봐세 민다고 해주세요. 그래서
Now, for example, a person would go traveling and they have a distance to go, and they would consult with a person who could point out where mistakes may be made along the way, who could explain the way and how one ought to proceed. Thus it is an ordinary person in their beginning treads along the path to eventually achieve the state in which they are able to place all sentient beings in their ultimate lasting contentment. That path, if it were named by the vehicle, would be the Mahayana vehicle. If by the paths the 5 paths, by the grounds, the 10 bodhisattva bhumis. And so, as there is a sequence and order to the progression, it is called stages of the path.
Oh, yeah, that and share the Lamrim, but share the Lamrim, Lamrim bus. Oh, yeah, that was a bit Changuchi, Taylor to Navy Laniche. That where the Lamrim, but this year, that Lamrim, but she will do. That Lamrim is to the Lamrim, but Yamachi, Langi Tone, and Suzuki. So, what you let give it, Lamrim, but she will do. What she needed to say. And then you below the song, you see, and the God of everybody is shit, chick, young. To the top of you let give it, I'm using by Yam's number on the Rimbashet and teach it. That's true. Yamlenchia, we're on the Shigina, Omar, Tenjo, Tenjin, Yaga, Nen, and then Tama, Sandy to go on. Or to do Lamir and Basu. Lobjon Chi is to do with that. Okay, some of Tana, Yamlenchi, and the Ton, and it's but this Yama. Get on without any younger as well.
The great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment describes these stages in a path, the destination of which is Buddhahood, awakening. The one treading the path is each one oneself. And the path itself is a path that begins in the beginnings of the development of realization in the mind. This begins in Guru devotion and proceeds unto the path of union, of no more training. It is a progression of increasing realization. From the standpoint of Dharma as a practice, one begins in an explanation of the preciousness of the human rebirth with its freedoms and endowments that are so difficult to secure. And this explanation then proceeds unto the state of awakening and Buddhahood. From the standpoint of each person in their practice, how it is that they will undertake their practice, several various explanations of that sequence of trainings may be given.
Oh, the Chenmo Lamrim share it, and on the Chidu Tamat, and what to enjoy to Jenyaga. Wash it, and then in the margin, and then he was on the Lamrim, what was in Mars and the Ondan. And that is the sheet of your.
The stages of the path, generally speaking, will be presented beginning in the difficulty of finding the precious human rebirth with its freedoms and endowments. Then it will proceed into the explanation of the Dharma of the 3 scopes, such as the general outline of the path.
Oh, yes, it's not a Lamrim, and we share the Lamrim, what my share the Tambo. And it everything the issue, knowing how everything around the you will then somewhat dig and more water share. And it go to down the shame. Oh, to see the
That sequence, the stages of the path, will begin with the access and the opening into the Dharma practice, which is the inheritance of the precious human rebirth, which is said to be more precious than the most valuable wish-fulfilling gem. Then the precious human rebirth is identified and its causes are understood.
Oh, so that somewhat enjoy them. Enjoy the most me at the chitula, washing at the chitula, petty. Butchin, Pesha, Butchin D, any Zachibu Manam Chizo, that's true. Doing the Yata, Zachibu Sigio, Carson Tachim Sigio, or a penny, the Awachagi or Miji Segio, it is not what Zachim is. The Butcher rest, which is the Gagoro, but it is enough pet, it is enough, and to Miludi, Elejam, Zachaware, Carson. Dila and the hotel, say Chimalaya, Louis Segre, the word to this, and not asking this model Chibores.
For the purpose of identifying the value of a precious human rebirth, it is likened to the preciousness of a wish-fulfilling gem. Any valuable gem ordinarily will be recognized for its value. Whoever finds it will acknowledge its value, because based upon it, possessing it, one is able to dispel some of their discontents achieve some of their ends. If it is precious, if a precious gem is so precious and acknowledged to be rare, recognize that far more rare, far more precious is the precious human rebirth. It is more valuable in this sense that it does provide contentment and relief from suffering in this life, but moreover, it does so in lives to come as well.
Oh, yeah, that Chenmo, and you can just do it. That's all you but and I never there is some string, no never. Tabat and the Kaduina, Peracho, the Lento, the Yoros, Yomaras, you should number of Masua, that Paveo, the Lengic never is. Lengic never said if a Lengic on the near maybe there was Zekers and the Hatani, Yankawi, but she was. Yankawi, which is Zekers, Miludi to number of Sung Viva, or did you say Sung as well.
The human rebirth is precious. It is sacred. It is for the reason that it is so exceedingly difficult to achieve in the first place. From whence did it come? Has it come but once? And is not easily secured. It only comes through the upholding of ethical discipline. And when that ethical discipline is upheld, one time alone is the precious human rebirth secured. It isn't guaranteed subsequently. Why is this emphasized? To emphasize and show clearly the difficulty of achieving a precious human rebirth. It only comes having upheld ethical discipline.
Boy, that and take it such way you, and Yaka way you will and Tamatola. Carchigers, Yaka Chilla, Nangalota, Yaka, even the Yinayan, Yenayang, and around a chick Pagania time during good open. Rangi Toba, you were Roche, and that Pajutana Yuna. Your Tio Mares, Nieka, Jigla, Nangelo, Nashes, Nangalo, the dog, the dinner, to do your Mares. The time to listen on the time to prejudice Tamatuina, yeah, your I never any Chimboda you will do. And Nieka, to take a duty that we had a dollar, Chicoyaki, and it's better having to cheer or to cheer Mara, much it Mares. Kamachi, Karchachik, Nimachi. You do chicken and Lama to us in Children, Chico, thank you as much.
Jigla, don't get Tindam. Jigla, and it
Nangelo.
oh, Nangelo. The precious human rebirth, like a precious gem, is easily lost. It is but momentarily had as a flash of lightning in the sky. It is easily lost. It isn't something that remains for long. So it isn't wise to consider it, to imagine it to be very lasting, and to imagine then that if it isn't used well now, one will have another chance a bit later. For it isn't this way. In fact, one must practice now, for the precious human rebirth is quick to pass, just like the flash of lightning in the sky. There is no later time that one will come to inherit it. One has it now, and so beginning with this very moment and second, and the mounting minutes and hours, and then the days, they must all be put to use, for the precious human rebirth is quick to pass.
Oh, you don't visit to do on the Lord, naturally, so the Yasan, so I slept over. The Mizil or Burgosi, you must be the Loma way or something, so I'm thanking you, shooting your tiki. Also, we visit washing your Mares, Ani, that consists of the Tamil, for Hanisotan, Manando Tambuli, Chava, the Chiba, the Navy, Rotten to some of Tangu, on the visit the hotel, and she paid the Chicotia in Goddess. And the Chixi, any matter to wash it up. To do it in the near water, Yidata, Sanjay, Kenish, and that to do some of Tamina, and make it safe. Hasn't to do yours. It's not fair till a time, petting, and the Lord shall have.
Just Migi look, said it any Karsa any any Yidak and Durna any Shuksumbre. In a Dunrodan and
Any Father, finish by your mother, to do it, telling woman we are house, not with other, 세 통화제 통되면 세링가 정도 통두고요.
When the human rebirth is likened to a flash of lightning, this ought to give rise to a feeling. The feeling that it would inform is the alternative to our habitual view that life is a continuous and lengthy affair, that there are years ahead of us. And we hold fast to this view and fail to recognize that in actuality it is fleeting, no different from a flash of lightning in the sky. When we compare the length of a human life to the length of the lives of Preta beings and hell beings, it is exceedingly short, in fact.
다 굉장히 다 미세 아주 미세세 세계상신이 간데 이미 내당 주문에 간데 이미 상 니즈디 시험 전에 아니 말하는 다 미세디 아니 지금 체디기 자와 디기 체디기 데스 기후 영향 지도라니 배조를 먼저 사야 아니 저들이 좀 체디 대박이나 아니 먼저 체디 뭐마신 거래스 다 체디기 자와 제고야 가르레스나 아니 체디기 대화를 서로 마땅하지 다 이제봐 체치만 치마 주주 튜디디 대화 중에 서로 마땅한 주주 rum고 대화는 처럼 대화 토비하게 유튜브에 대한 멜로디기 제고야 돼 자와들을 해서
The span of a human life ought to be understood in its definite fleetingness. Understood this way, then one is able to divest oneself from the infatuation with this single life's pleasures, satisfactions, wealth accumulations, social maneuverings against those one dislikes, and the rest of all of those trivial interests, and turn one's attention to subsequent lives with the long view of finding contentment that is lasting for lifetime after lifetime and generation after generation.
예, 이제가 맞다. 나도 가르치고 그래서는다. 세대기 밀루디 마토르베 몰라 아니 냠내 치고 그래서 냠내 냠술랑 임불내고 그래서 어디다 안다 임불내야다 안다 랑라 대화 친구 대화 집에 유만 치고 이제 토비아가 된다 아니 냠내는 니다 센스 요하면 간다 가도 있나요? 생이네 니네 냠내 치투가 되고 그래서 어디에 맞아봐 있나 아니 세대 균류를 균류 입에 나는 랑라 주는 라마면 그래 근데 이게 아니 뭐 세대 마토로 봐 이걸 이거를 랑투 같아 아니 다 뭐가 대치들어다 주냐 내체 라미 로는 치고 같아 다 그래서
What is left to do then but to use this life before one discards it? Take the essence of this life before it is past, and to practice the Dharma, for through the Dharma then one will come to experience the greatest uninterrupted contentment, this great and uninterrupted contentment that the Dharma yields is only yielded through disciplined, persistent practice in which day and night are not differentiated and practice is continuous. For if one fails to practice in such a way, life indeed is exceedingly short, and during the meantime, one has no liberty at all to practice. So the urgency to extract the essence of this life, and thus the graded stages of the path, and in their explanation.
예, 딱 간단 수준이 미지되기 미주 나가 시계에 미주되기 상황이 센나지 된거지 거체 제도나 아니 다 먼저 가르치고 그래서 다 제도 가르치고 그래 가르치고 그래서 어떤 사람들도 그래서 또 딜리버와 일단 다 뒤지 여바이나 아니 먼저 미주 딜레잖아 아니 다 랑가 시행이 대화 탐지 둘둘이 상기 고화성에 대한 미리 디테일도 투그레스 텔레잖아 거기 야총하고 상을 땅에나 라니 수수 동해를 쳐봐 코알을 쳐봐 제약이 harvasing the young, military and top to race. And Chenmo Pesodana made other make the one young, and song with one young go cheba the young, military and chit to go to Cheta, military chit we are on what top shape. And it's said, we did the washing of Machina, he gave it chit to get it, someone of Corby Maro, someone of Corsona, and chit to get the rest.
When circumstances of a human life are understood in this way, when one fully comprehends one's circumstances, truly understands one's circumstances, then naturally follows the question, knowing this, what ought I do? Knowing this, what must I do? The feeling will come naturally. And it informs the response through this life. On the basis of the precious human rebirth, I will, for myself and all others, establish sentience in the state of omniscient Buddhahood. Or should one lessen the scope of one's ambitions slightly, then I myself will extricate myself from cyclic existence sorrows and achieve moksha liberation. This too I can achieve on the basis of the precious human rebirth. More so, I, with the precious human rebirth, may annul future rebirths in hell realms and instead increase my fortunes to experience birth as human being again and heavenly being. This too is possible on the basis of the precious human rebirth. Where one fails to comprehend one's circumstance and what a human life entails, one will fail to feel and be animated in this way.
Oh, yeah, that and that kind they get the Chituya Yoga, the Chibu Yoga, the Carres, not some there were Mintuya, domain, what is domain, Dubi Yoma, there was Dubi Yona, there were Drubu, domain Pangor, or Kizit, Ilatin, there were together, but in the yoga. That is she can your teacher, that Jola and Lamrim your response.
Then the question follows, what in particular ought I to do? What must necessarily be done? Recognizing that I desire contentment and wish to avoid discontents, understanding that I wish for happiness and wish to avoid sadness, I would then understand too that the causes of contentment I must achieve, and the causes for the elimination of discontents too I must dispense with. And so that this come to pass, there is a progression along the path that one pursues, and one learns the outline of it through the great treatise on the stages of the path of enlightenment.
But that really do some of that, giving you one several common that you can just down, Kulum Sira, Chenmo, Kulum Yaching the Pone, Lane Yaching the way or TV, Kulum, that Anamon Lavi Chanju, Lamrim the Loton Chevala, Kulum Sanshut, Kulum Yakut Tango, and the Tangu Tamata, Kulum Sanshudi, and I'm doing some of the part Torne. And she has some Shen, they were over Chelva, doing several children, Lucky, somebody Mena, and in the real Lavia, Kulum the Tangi of my response.
In order for this to ever come to pass, one's first intention must be adjusted in the most sublime, in the most encompassing and broad way conceivable. That is, as I set forth to study the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, I inform my study through this sublime mind that is the entire divestment from selfish preoccupation and entire commitment to establishing sentient beings in lasting contentment and the alleviation of all sentient life's sufferings. This is the most sublime intention and the one to inform the study of the great treatise.
어디서나 약간 수수 만년 먹는 최년 뭐야지 인생 대대지기 치고는 최년이 유선에 상관한 고농도 되나 아니 최대 피부친 거 최대라는 생규를 해봐 어디도 가면 자기 열에서 일 빼도 시험에는 지ringi 자화직이는 지도 자화직이 뭐 있나 아니 당고 자화직 맞이거나 나는 착시도 때문에 자기 쪽으로 성공이 돼가지고 지이 이 친구도 그다음에 착시 때문에 어디 최대 남들도 좀 꿀릉 최대를 해서
Now, as I set forth to listen to the exposition of the Dharma, I do so for the reason that, for the greatest reason of all, with the most sublime intention of all. And when I do so, this study becomes the Mahayana practice of the Dharma, and it becomes beneficial truly for the mind. And this is no different. Setting one's intention and objective at the outset is no different from the way in which we work ordinarily in the world, in which we see roughly what we must do to accomplish an aim, and we set out to do it, thinking, I will do this and this and this, and this is one's purpose at the outset, so we establish our purpose at the outset.
스타트인데 제가 배나마도 지도나가 강기 저와 배나마지 수술 대사기 대화로 목한 거에 차시 되는 뭐 차시 이내 뭐지 강바자야 이내 강바자라는 나는 대단히 차시 되는데 농주단 뭐 되게 나지 가슴들이 뭐 연구 삼을 당당한 내가 제가 연구도와 대난시 다 나눠서 되려야 남들이 양내시도 원로 그런 쪽안에서도 저 추도 원로제 얘는 무시 자유선 깨는 자유선 저걸 라베디 무시지 아니 다만 자유선 줄ati 저걸 랍사는 가지고서 다만 사기지 고와 토베디 다만 유기 차차되고 제가 중요히 좋습니다. 뭐도 스토어에서
And ordinarily in the world, as we have a mundane objective to build a home, for instance, we think of the floor plan and chalk that out. And then we begin the actual construction of what will be our home. And when that's completed, then we know that will be followed by our occupying it, beginning to inhabit it, and then storing it with our belongings and the rest. And in steps, we see how the occupation of our objective will occur. And this is no different from our view from the outset of our purpose in the training, in the great treatise in the stages of the path to enlightenment, which begins for us in the establishment of the proper intention, paired with preliminary practices that are part of preparation, and then comes the actual meditation that is the development of the mind of awakening. And when the mind of awakening arises, then the actual training in the precepts of the mind of awakening. And then the labor, that is the conclusion of the path, is the achievement of the state of awakening, Buddhahood, and this is the concluding practice.
이거도 땅으로 시발 제주기랑 되나야 아니 계산다 다시 겹시베 아주 시시 중고시 시에서 어디 가나 그러대요 저는 제주기랑 쓰기리 아니 이제 가서 내 통보를 겨와 제가 시달 가장 개친구이다 나 사제 로스트는 이제 시행이 어려서
저를 추적이 나네 시부디 지수 이런 왜
시발 뭐 중고고
아니 그래서 아니 연락 되죠 연락 되는데 아니 저를 추적이 나네
알아 저게 추적이 나네 저게 추적하고 도심 바로 정보대로 저게 추적이 봐 저게 추적이 알아 되는다
어디디 얘는 그래서 아니 아버지 저를 아니 아버지기 난세디
난세 아베 난세제 아베 난세가 나와대라 디바 야라두 야라두 아베 난세 야라두지 야라두기 나네 아니 시바 지라디라
Then the stages of the path are stages through preliminary practices, the actual practices, and concluding practices. There are stages, and one must practice in this progressive way. And so we find ourselves now in the 6 preliminary rites. In the 5th preliminary rite, within the 5th preliminary rite, there are the 7 branch offerings of the Anuttara Puja. And within the 7 branches, we find ourselves in the 4th, that is the practice of rejoicing. The purpose to rejoicing in virtue, is we are presently engaging in the accumulation of virtue. Wherever non-virtues are dispensed with, abandoned, that amounts to the accumulation of virtue too. Anywhere there has been virtue accumulated, it must be preserved. It ought to be made continuous as cause for resulting contentment. Wherever there will be contentment to result, one wishes to naturally increase the intensity of its cause, and so we engage in rejoicing. In worldly activities, whenever anyone recommends something as bringing great yield but requiring little effort, everybody flocks to it and wishes to engage in just that. Wherever work is not required, but there is some great yield that results, we are interested, and so we ought to be interested in rejoicing, for it requires so little in the way of effort, but achieves so much in the way of autonomy, and brings us so far along in the practice of completing the accumulations. Jetsongkhapa speaks of engaging in many efforts. There are many forms effort takes. Effort that is effort through austere practice. There are 2 efforts that are through less austere practices. Efforts that are relatively easy. Efforts that really require no effort at all. Among them, rejoicing. Among practices of virtue, rejoicing is the one that requires least in the way of effort. It requires so little effort in the sense that one hasn't got to move one's body, raise one's voice, or even move their mind very much. As one eats and enjoys one's meal, one may rejoice and thereby engage in the accumulation of tremendous virtue. And where it is so readily available and requires so little effort, should we overlook it, that would set us back.
And the land is to be the some China and chest be around check. And it's some loose and give a check. And more chairs soon on soon these issues. And around the mention and no that among the Tamara and that will go up to
is a practice of rejoicing in its virtue found in the scriptures. It certainly is in the sutra. The Buddha Bhagavan spoke to Subahu when Subahu requested special advice, for he, though an attendant to the Buddha, many years in service, wasn't able to part with his kingdom, and so asked the Buddha Bhagavan, what may I do when I am unable to sacrifice my kingdom? What practice is available to me? The Buddha Bhagavan replied, it is okay, Subahu. What is available to you is the sublime practice of rejoicing, the development of the mind of awakening, and the practice of dedication. And through these, Subahu did indeed achieve arhatship.
Oh, yes, today you do the moment just be running your singing. And that one, Sugar, don't just be running your singing. And let the wall. Some little child cabo is Chicago yard. Zidan Chanjusin, the Jibby Yamena, the yard, the Jerry Yameni do, and Chanjusin, but we Yamen Chaggy, Yangas Chaggy yard. And the Inayam, Kanda just be running Yamen. There was Chevala and Shana Tapo, and Descent, Kondo the Yuna, and just be running your get to Mara. Just be running your Chevala Tapo, Descent. Never on a chick way at it and just beautiful heavy or essence.
The virtue that is rejoicing, which is a necessity for us, is difficult for the beginning person, the beginner. It is hard to comprehend the practice. And this is for the reason that it is actually a very elevated practice in the charya, the very conduct of the bodhisattvas having developed the mind of enlightenment. These bodhisattvas, the practice of rejoicing is a critical practice, most important to them, but it is a difficult one for the abecedarian, or the beginner. And so it is difficult for that beginning person because of the interference of anger, of jealousy, of competitiveness. Wherever there's anger, jealousy, competitiveness, and envy, these interfere, make impossible rejoicing.
Oh, yes, it's not that Maran to be Chizonalina, Sutul Magawa, Sutuki Magawa, Mission, Tendal Chevin, oh, the politics, Iran chase, state color of your Kazusu Magawa, the Chiondi, or the Koran chair, the Karina, Kinzish budget transit, and go with the culture chair, the Iran savage, they have Sutherland and the trouble. And Jason, and it's good show the lay, and it's beyond my but the done, and the June Tashua, or Chizan Jessica, my dear, in Zendo, do you own to your husband?
Ordinarily in the world, when another person whom we dislike engages in something virtuous, we find it very difficult to rejoice in that action of theirs. We bring in some other rationale to discredit that person because we dislike that person. Instead of rejoicing, we search for faults to discredit the person because of our competitiveness, because of our jealousy, and competitiveness, jealousy, and envy interfere and make impossible rejoicing.
Boy, so that the Matthew Shannon Kari and this round Magawa in it, and around the Java member in it, Karishi, Shannon Jibatangi in it, and the mission of this public Kanan, Job Soul, Jobu in it, Kariku Dume, Dover, Chow, Kari, Jabu in it, Java de la the COVID. The Shannon Kandoshi to Chewa the Yahore, and the Dangi with the Chilis and the Kawa, and he kept on Chenmo. That's good.
Whenever any other person engages in a virtue, whether they are disliked by us or unknown to us, in any case, when another engages in generosity or when another protects another's life, recognize in that virtuous practice something well done, something to emulate, and then celebrate that. And the celebration of those virtuous practices to emulate is the practice of the Dharma.
이 안에서는 제고야 제는 케빈 가리어 페어 가리어에서 저들이 어쩌다 제외이나 맨날 가지고 미디 여와친이 가지고디 제수 거기 맨날 딱 여와 가르치는 그 시에는 또 거치는 다 시에는 거기다 같이 봐도 가리냐면 주는 거 가리냐면 제시하고 있나요? 미친이 미디다 랑이 빠르라 가지고디 또 랑이 껴와 있나 당 제수 이란 체벌을 지금 파주는 거 체배되게 답직 당 편에 도그레스 당 변한 모두 취미를 필요해나 취미 파주대로 취미 직급의 편이죠. 당이 된 제수 이란 체벌은 취미니 필요해요. 제가 දි나지 답답 도그레스 아니 랑다 시제 용어로 또 번역으로 있는 아니 그 간체바 대리랑 도착한 도그레스 아니 가족들랑 똑같아 근데 이번에는 아니 거기 제배되네. 간다 책 강사마다는 제가 도구를 해서 내가 라기 제수이랑 제가 친구를 때는 개와 차상 가족목을 깔리자 수술 깔려 맞아버도 소남사 어떤 차상 도가 예외인 이 괜히들 요래 소나스.
So the necessity of rejoicing. What benefits follow from rejoicing? When another, whoever they may be, engages in any virtue, whatever that virtue may be, simply being helpful to another, being generous with another, upholding ethical discipline, whatever the virtuous case may be, between the two, that other and oneself, where the other is of lesser realization, then one, by simply rejoicing in their virtue, achieves for oneself twice that virtue accumulated by the other. For instance, should a person, another, make a light offering, then one makes that other has made one light offering. When rejoiced in by you, you achieve twice the virtue. And where realization is equal between that other person and you yourself, and you rejoice in their virtue, you share in the very equal share of virtue. And when the other is of higher realization and you rejoice in their virtue, then you achieve the half of theirs. And so it is that the other does the work while oneself is idle, yet one receives these great results nevertheless.
다 딜레 냠내야 세트 토르다. 당은 개뱅이 차대 있는 병이 차대 있는 치료당 삼당의 이나 아니 만한도다 가르쳐 그래서나 빼나만도 다 거기 시행 강사시 거기 보라는 게 제수 이란 체의 유디 상계가 장주선마 현재기 개발의 제수 이란다 제수 이란다 이게 테스트를 하고 요르데 있는 제수 이란 지도가 있나 아니 다 가르치기 yin ando yin ando da chidang gyuma 왜 제시해 왔다 되는 양면 제 토부인 자주 잡아서 산계를 담아다니나 다 산계까지 다 빼다 셀 개월 이다가 하나 시에 봐야 다 정주 선보다 빼서는 해봐이나 정주 선보 장은 사 당보지 다 정주 선보는 장선 파고했다 돈이 모습도 또왜 마음줄을 당보 개발나 근데 가르고 파고차 사당 도버와 전에 사당보 되기 이만 직 제격이 여와비 만도 미지직을 두고나 두고는 두고 말했어. 원치는 두두에 영화를. 대대기 개와직 랑이 제수이랑 전 장주선거 사건으로 개와를 제수이랑 제외이나 야제 야 도구면은 딱 간다되는 야제되는 제가 용화직 두고요. 대리지 토부이나 하장이 변 전부 다 교산 전부 차지는 것은 이제는 장주선이 개와를 제수이랑 개친구 입어 송고요. 해서
Then if one were to intensify the practice of rejoicing for even greater yields, to make it even more profitable, to draw forth even greater benefits, when that other person in whom one rejoices, the other individual, is a Buddha or a Bodhisattva engaging in virtues, a virtuous Buddha and Bodhisattva, and one rejoices, though the practice of rejoicing is so very difficult. But supposing one were able to then, and one rejoices in the virtues of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, or a particular Buddha or a particular Bodhisattva. Ordinarily, we measure the results of rejoicing in terms of ordinary individuals, but here we have the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, whose virtues are boundless. And should one rejoice in the virtues of a Bodhisattva who has achieved the first Bodhisattva bhumi, in Arya Bodhisattva who has direct insight into emptiness, from the very first, this Arya Bodhisattva has direct insight into emptiness and abides on the first Bodhisattva bhumi. That Bodhisattva, in a day's worth of virtue, should one in one's entire lifetime try to match it, would be unmatchable. Yet, if one were to rejoice in their virtues, one wouldn't achieve 100% of theirs, but should one achieve half or even slightly less than half, it would be tremendously profitable. And so the value of rejoicing. Rejoicing in the virtues of a bodhisattva, the ability to rejoice in the virtues of a bodhisattva is a tremendous engine of autonomy for a person. Should one come by that engine of autonomy, such that one is able to rejoice in the virtues of the bodhisattva, this has become the sublime practice of virtue. Now here in this region, call it a region, call it this nation state that we're in, this country we're in, here religious traditions proliferate. There are spiritual practices in abundance here. And there is religious freedom too here. And there are religious people here too. And that means that there is tremendous virtue ongoing here to rejoice in. To recognize the situation in these terms brings one to the practice of rejoicing that will be profitable. In the transmission of the gurus and the tradition of the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, the sublime activities of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas are given in their account. That is, always beginning with the development of the mind of awakening, followed by the enlightening activities of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas in their particulars, in the accounts of the various individuals who have developed the mind of enlightenment and gone on to engage in enlightening activities. And with this, to complement these two, all of the virtuous activities of all others, when they become the object in which we rejoice, and we ultimately must rejoice in them, we win for ourselves great autonomy. And through that autonomy that we have won, our every thought and wish we are able to achieve.
아니 대부 대화를 제수 이랑 어떻게 숨을
In the object of rejoicing, there are two, the cause and the result. One rejoices in cause and result. The cause is, call it merit, call it virtue, in any case, the cause. And the result is the contentment that flows from it. These two are two objects of rejoicing.
그 대화를 제수 이랑 아니 대화요. 아니 대부 대화를 제수 이랑 세지로디 먼저 다른 차도 매번 아예 매번 아예 빵 아예 빵 차도 빵 아니 제수 이랑 치고거든. 우리 동거에서
It's comparatively easy to rejoice in the cause that is virtue in another. More difficult for us because of jealousy and envy to rejoice in the contentment that another experiences as a result of the cause and virtue. Thus, the need to abandon, to dispense with the jealousy and the envy.
있다. 대부 대화를 제수 이랑해야 되는 대부 대화를 다 받는 마음 대로. 제수 이랑해야 되는 롱주를 제수 이랑 미리 가지고 신연을 제수 이랑 덤조를 제수 이랑 아니 소상고를 제수 이랑 랑소요 랑소만 지도 그래서 민감한 거 아니 또그 아니 년다 어디를 제수 이랑 제요 제 유도 제사도 대부 대화를 롱주 제수 이랑 제 유대를 뜻이 좀 그래서
So the results that are object of rejoicing too are for us wealth that others enjoy, their wealth at their disposal, their education and understanding and knowledge, the status that they have, their physique, their health, their fortunes, food and clothing and fame. These are all resources that are the result and the contentment that results, that is cause to, rather object to, of rejoicing.
제가 제수이랑이다 제 강사 원에서 법률이 제수이랑 지유 진일이 강사이 원에는 이간이 교화를 제수이랑 시행이 교화를 제수이랑 어디래요 해서
And from the standpoint of the person rejoicing, one may rejoice in their own virtue and the virtue of others.
뭐라니 교화를 제수이랑 어디라요 아니라니 제 심바 교화 뭐마다는 뭐마다 세트 우리 제 심바게 아니 교화를 제수이랑나 아니 다들 제 심바를 교화를 제수이랑 어디래 이제 그래서
In one's own virtues in which one may rejoice. One rejoices in virtues that are completed from past lives and from earlier in this life. And two, one rejoices in ongoing virtues.
답변은 생나마다 나마나마다 세트라 뭐만고요 뭐도 줄래 제수이랑 치고 오이나 계속 아주 생각하고 전통만 무슨 일도 좀 말해. 근데 뭐 아니 제가 생각 안 하고 윤세다 리퍼 상관 땅에 아니 우리 교화들이 제발 때 교화들이 배치를 하고 지 교화 제발 때는 마음을 들고 도와라. 윤세만 뭐 상관 땅에 아니 교화 체유가 이제 제발 내가 제수이랑 저러 어디 아니 라니까 제 생비 교화를 제수이랑 생각했습니다.
The virtues of past lives and past lives, when object of rejoicing, are not immediately apparent. They are accessed or understood through reason and argument. This and this must have been done for this consequence ever to have occurred. This consequence is present, implying that this and this preceded it. These and these things were virtues, and for this reason I have cause for rejoicing in virtues completed. One develops a conviction in the virtues completed, for which one is responsible, and rejoices in these.
일단은 되게 제일 저 너무 잘하는 모습을 쓰나 실 오늘 실그래 챙기러 대만이다 대만 나그 대만 모습 제목은 재미도는 제수랑 그래서
And then in this life, the most of the virtues are recalled, are apparent to a person, known to the person, and then cause rejoicing.
일단 나는 생각의 제와 제와 들을 아니 계제 간데 돈에 아니 먼저 상호 그래 간데 상호 땅을 했으나 배는 세디랑 아주 세디 때 상호 밀류 쳐봐 아니 최제하게 귀에 줘봐 아 그래서 상황에도 개몽은 수준 손을 제부 이박이 아니 using some or
Past lives and past lives virtues. How do we comprehend them? How do we understand them? What rationale allows us to discover them? In the present inheritance of a fortunate human rebirth, in the present circumstances in which the Dharma is available to study for us, these can only result from the practice of ethical discipline. And so ethical discipline is the pre-existing cause that I rejoice in.
아니 지금은 거기에 온보 상황 대주가마다 저거만 남실라 치료비 냠내라 수료비 냠내지 아 지바다 저바다 누구 냠내 제발 때는 다른 마음 중화디 아니 이게 뽑을 그들 제수이나 저번에
Material resources, physical health, mental faculties all intact, circumstances of these sorts indicate the practice of the six perfections, generosity, patience, and the rest. These are what have caused for us the inheritance of the precious human rebirth. We are able to conclude that.
Not some sort of some don't do it that they was in sign. 생아마티 아니 지당치는 만화야 오천 미리 생모만 밀려면 되지 아니 라기 된 만화로 두발 때네 달래 밀루도 발 때네 아니 라기 베다 숨수삼나 강이 여가는데 두발 영화되게 정말로 생아마로 지당 상황이 제부이마 어디지 대나신 세치말라양 라기 제부 성부 부위에나 세대기 지당 만화와 제부부 여봐 세대라 이거 펑 겨워도 제바이나 지다 만원을 그 만원은 세치말랑 배 수주 여바이 와서 요구해 봐. 어떤 이들 이거 만식이 도는 도구를 해서
In short, to make concise the argument here, what occurred in the past must necessarily have been the faultless upholding of ethical discipline, the putting to perfect use of the precious human rebirth, and as a result, it has conferred upon us this inheritance that is the precious human rebirth that we enjoy now. The causes in our past were salubrious. They led to this positive outcome for us. Now, should we want the very same to occur in our future again, in future lives, then we must put the precious human rebirth we possess now to its use and dispense with the destructive non-virtues and pursue virtue, and then we inherit the result of this, not only in this life, but in lives to come.
Oh, yeah, that's not what you do. just any 생목이 깨워서 무슨 생목이 깨워서 무슨 되기 아니 말은 밀루는 무슨 또 아니 배라나 오모 상황수 강가 대화 용어에 이거 되게 더 까지 체스 다 이거들 다 되게 밀루는 무슨 다들 수고 밀루는 이거 무슨 되기 마치마 양 말고 체스 양 수면 좀 말고 체스 양교 밀루다 하기 고방터 대화 용어도 이거 또 어디 말은 수요래서
And then the two palms draw near and meet, and one acknowledges the preciousness of one's past virtues and acknowledges the preciousness of one's past virtues, that one achieved the precious human rebirth in this life as a result of the faultless upholding of ethical discipline, and that one is presently experiencing contentment. And this is all by the kindness of the precious virtues of one's past. And so then, in the precious human rebirth at present, that it not slip and fall down a steep precipice to the hell realms, but instead ensures for itself increasing fortunes to come, such that there be births as human beings again and as heavenly beings. Prayers are sung.
뭐야, 제 딜을 삼았다는 제 딜이라는 게 와체봐. 다른 게 생각 챔바. 아니, 라기다 배 미신을 펜들 지고 라기 지. 동반이 고바 자주 생 고바 지바 땅완 최초선特바 땅바도 고바 제바 아니 라기 베스 주카 다 최초 베제도 로데바 거선 구 무슨 투생 샤와다 뭐 미시엔 로바 체요바 가방 고바 신데 또바 피요바 가리 개와 체바 이마이나 개와 체바 딜라양 제수이랑 체고레스 제수이랑 체바이나 아니 곧 개와 체바디 마 미얀마도 체야 페어 체레스 근데 이 이치도 맞아버지 그 가와도 마고바이나 아니 그 개와도 갈래가 총총돈 저는 라도 그래서
Then the virtue of the past and the virtue in this life, the virtue of help, of assisting others, developing the mind of awakening, meditating on emptiness, studying the Dharma, contemplating the Dharma, meditating on the Dharma, reading the scriptures, erecting stupa, erecting representations, building representations of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, building temples, making offerings, whatever the virtuous practices are, all of these one rejoices in as one must. And when one does, then one's virtues are not lost. One's virtues are intensified. But where there's no interest, there's disinterest and a disregard for rejoicing, then the loss is very great.
이제 세상 비례 다 많아도 되게 미세나 수수로 미세나와 다 많아서 지도나 이번에는 이 수수로 요노는 저 장가계로 물을 장가계로 자 장가계로 아니 수수가 지도 가오치죠 마치 이제 많이 소미스 장가계 망고 열어왔어 이 교회잖아 장가계로 이제 저거를 장가계로 가리 뱅글스나 근데 수수기 때는 우유도지 장가로 이제 망치 들이치면은 수수기 세들이 저와 상으로 따야다 대화지 되기로 했어 내 두고래 이만도 신다 들리 퇴배기 때문에 이거 퇴배해 요 말했어 다만 개와 지교지 장가교 아니 그 제수이랑 장가교 제수이랑 체바이나 아니 가르치면서 세 들레데 이거 지침만 근절을 대화 제도야게 아니 그 손은 자기가 해서
죽대라. Somebody 한결 찍습니다. 죽대라.
개와 지교 개와 개와 지교 장가교 아니 장가교 아니 이 개와 이체는 내가 가고 그러죠. 어디 제바이나 아니 거기 우리 장가교와는 배 채워 세 들레 대화 여기 세 치마 비즈를 대화 제도에서
Ordinarily, in the world, in our lives, we are able to count up our savings, any money that we've saved, and any possessions that we have. We can count them. They're countable. And the use of counting these things is that when we've accumulated enough of them, it gives us a sense of satisfaction, a sense of reward. But beyond that sense of satisfaction and reward in this life, these things are able to give nothing else to us, whereas when one counts up and imagines their virtues and then rejoices in one's virtues, beyond any wealth that one accumulates in this life, this virtue that one rejoices in brings contentment, sure, in this life, but certainly too in the lives to come, thereby far surpassing the value of any material wealth.
그런 개와치를 많이 가지고는 대규모 어느 시기에 되는 천년이 하고 요만해서 그런 보다 예산이 되지가 않고 솔직히가 더 가오되는 공짜. 요지가 아니 더 나보다 유연처럼 더 나보다 좀 예처럼 더 가오되는 공짜. 그런 보다만 야가로 드리니 맞지가 가르치에 맞지. 야고 제도는 더 가오돼야 장가에 싸고. 야고 제매도 더 나보다 장가간 거. 아니 또 가오데 잠깐 망가도나 그런 감자를 거라디 그 그놈 수준저 그런 민원들 수준저와 민도들 배고 제도와 그 수준저와 도시 제배하고 제들은 교육과 제시하는 거하고 나고들 망가다는 방뭐 배고 제최 단대부터 단대들이 되게 수수로 처분당이 왔어요. 그다음 어디에 지금 연애 제야 되는 야고츠기요. 그래서
In the tradition of the mind training, there is a Geshe Bin. And Geshe Bin, at that time, there were no calculators for easy calculation. But when he counted up his virtues and non-virtues after a day, he had the device of a heap of white stones and a heap of black stones, the heap of white stones on the right, the heap of black stones on the left beside his seat. And he'd review the day and count out the virtues. Where there was a virtuous count, he'd pull out a white stone. Where there was a non-virtuous count, he'd pull out a black stone. And then after having counted them up, he'd count white stones against black stones. Where there were more white virtuous stones, then his dharma name was kingly ethics, but he was known as Geshe Ben. But when he counted more white stones, he would praise himself in excess and say, King of ethical discipline, truly today you have lived up to your name. But when he counted more black stones, then he'd say, you ass, you are still as incorrigible as ever. And so he counted his virtues this way. And so this is the way it may be done, and these are the benefits that would stem from the virtuous practice of rejoicing. Where there are non-virtues that we count against ourselves, confess to them and purify them. Where there are virtues to our count, then rejoice in them. And then the virtues of others in which we may rejoice, there are the virtues of the enemy who has once done us some harm, and the virtues of the friend, the one close to us, and the virtues of all those strangers unknown to us. These are objects of rejoicing in the virtues of others. Others are of 5 kinds for the purpose of rejoicing: the Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, the Shravakas, the Pratyeka Buddhas, and ordinary beings. These are 5 bases for rejoicing. Now, of these 5, the greatest rejoicing is the rejoicing in the ordinary individuals, those who are like ourselves. And then those who are like ourselves, ordinary individuals, there are the enemies, those we dislike. Rejoicing in them, we win for ourselves great autonomy. So too, when we rejoice in the virtues of our friends and those who are strangers to us. In the recognition that the virtues of all these individuals are the same, the friend, the foe, and the stranger to us, their virtues are the same to us. This causes a great, tremendous tsunami of blessings for us. And then too, when we sleep, when we eat, at any moment, we are able to rejoice. And when we do, with little effort, we experience the great benefits of rejoicing.
누구 또 제가 괜히 친구 중에 하나 왔으나 계산 친구도 왔으면 그것은 고민하는 말로 친구들이 생도 그러는 괜히 여같이 또 성사도도 야고도 와서
And if one grows well acquainted with this view and the advantages of rejoicing and grows accustomed to actually rejoicing, then later in life, when one cannot actually prostrate, cannot use their body in the same ways that they could formerly, nevertheless, recalling the advantage of merely rejoicing, one may continue to win the results of those very same activities of prostrating and the rest.
그다음 하나도 농부들도 찾아온다. 농부 야기 친구도 농부들도 아니 물론 친구 마음도 알게 또 마음을 계속 하면서 봐. 이거 아니 별로 야주고 뒤야. 근데 마음도 왔다. 관도 간 걸로 아니 즉 양내 마음고 치토야 자진 요마로 이는 뒤에 상고 요래. 아니 수고 간다 세는 거 요래. 이내가 아니 양내 지역이 그거 신발 탑시도 제수이라는 것들이 지금 고는 양내 치토에는 동의가 말해 계산 친구가 해서
Now, in developed countries where many of the elders are in nursing homes, they live long lives there, 90, 100, and they have the circumstance of a long life. But apart from rejoicing, they haven't got practices of the Dharma available to them. But they have this long life, and they may put it to use by rejoicing. They may recall that this time spent in the nursing home may be used that way, and then it would be very constructive.
말하는 게 되게 야구도 수술 포함한 양면들이 좀 비치는 아니면 제수이라는 서비스 되는 시기를 좀
And this is the feeling I get, and based on my experience, so I present it this way to you.
뭐야, 다 제수이라는 대단한 상식이 수술 양면체는 안 대표자 망고는 다 우리 망고요. 그래서 빼망고 양면 망고는 이제 우리 망고요. 다 먼저 대라 대샤 다 나봐 야라 나봐 또고 그 야라 시기 해서
We will conclude rejoicing here. There are innumerable stories, innumerable accounts of the practices of others, the practice of rejoicing, but we will conclude here with this branch of rejoicing and move to the fifth of the 7 branches, the request for the teaching or the request for the turning of the wheel of the Dharma.
뭐야, 다 전단다 추고 그 야라 생애디다 상계다 한다 모습 빼자라 좀 상계 좀 되대. 또추 연바 되게 따고 또 시계도 봐. 모습 추진 동네 아니 다 추고 그게 그 수와다베게 루기다 아니 냐행 돈은 시계가 요래서
Requesting the wheel of Dharma to be turned is, in its explanation, derived from first the exemplar of the Buddha Shakyamuni, the protector of the Dharma. The story, the practice of requesting the turning of the wheel of the Dharma then is drawn from this exemplar.
뭐야, 다리 가르치네스나 좀 상계는 사고시고 추마좀 슈바는 그랑이 불에 다추 얘기 추 사모되는 선지기 고투기 나는 게 시험을 고투고 말해서는 추마좀 슈샤와 이제 아니 가르치는 다 제대로 하고 상바다 야지도 아니 저랑이 돼 이게 간만에 추 고로나 소화다 때문에 아니 추로 고아서
The Buddha Bhagavan achieved awakening and for 49 days remained silent. In his heart, he felt that the subtlety of the Dharma, though he might teach it to others, would surpass their comprehension. And so he remained silent. As he remained silent, he was approached by Brahma and Indra, and Brahma and Indra request that in this world system he indeed teach the Dharma.
어야다 아니 저 보라면 소화다 말하는 산지기 수지 볼 때 대바시 당고도 대시 초고로 등이 아니 코로나를 좀 보라래요.
And so, petitioned by Brahma and Indra, the Buddha Bhagavan taught the four truths of the noble ones. These four truths of the noble ones, the Bhagavan taught to the five close disciples.
사람도 산지기 취소해야 되는 명이 최고로 쓴다고 콜로 민다고 안딜래야 빼다 유생 이제 뭐고는 숨기가 해서 뭐지.
And that the teaching of the Buddha Dharma be known as the turning of the wheel of Dharma has its rationale, has its reason.
빼도 시들 콜로디기 콜로디로 셴바이는 콜로디기 그냥 콜로디의 제국이 콜로 주연진은 우리 루버신의 신 파도와치 아니 거기 마사마 포살에 자고 콜로디 지기 요바다 아니 지금 콜로 셴발에 아니 제기다 당기 거기 다 뛰고야 누가 콜로신 뛰고요 되게 빼야 되네 아니 저거 되나요 이제 자와 통배차네 아니 주의 그거 내게 다 그래서
Now, for example, a wheel is a conveyance. When it is mounted, one may travel. The Chakravartin kings traveled to other regions and conquered those places. With a wheel, one can climb an incline. One can smoothly descend the decline. And it is the same with the Dharma.
제가 산재기 숨을 쉬고 그거에 당기 경험성을 똑같이 아니 쉬어서 때는 시기를 깨버지 아니 시바나 정보 쉬듯이 저거 보고 때는 걸어가는 상고를 뒤로 걸어 좀 거기를 아니 그 뒤로 걸어 가시를 가지고 보고 가시를 돌아오는 거 같은 뭐든 뒤로 시기를 깨버지 아니 이제 걸어가는 상고에 뭐라고 있냐 거기에 요새 다다 만들어 봐도 뒤로 또바기야 여바도 봐도 용어디 아니 콜로도 유시의 신도 도와서 뺏는 거네 아니 저거 쓰는 다 해서
The Dharma, in its experience, conducive to realization, is realization that subsequently arises in other minds. In the minds of others, the Dharma causes realization. The Buddha Bhagavan taught four truths of the noble ones to five noble disciples, five close disciples, and hearing the Dharma, the wheel of Dharma turned, in their minds turned a revolution such that they became arhats, and others achieved the path of seeing. So it is that the Dharma is a revolution. The revolution has continued to this day, moving minds from place to place.
아니 최지 콜로기 거는 쉬는 아니 당기 유튜브에 안 가베제니가 봐 정말 잘 지고 있나시 최지 콜로기 콜로가 때네 아니 당기 규지 셈이 자 유무도 좀 뉴어지게 왜 아니 신 거기 다들 저거 뉴어지게 왜 추통배잖아요 아니 콜로 저거 이제 빼니 거네 아니 추통과가 아니 콜로 저거 있다 그래서
And mounting the wheel, a sovereign is able to overcome resistance among adversaries through the employment of the wheel. Through the employment of the wheel of Dharma, the resistance of the mental affliction, the klesha, are overcome. For this reason too, the second reason, we find the similarity with the wheel, such that the Dharma ought to be known as the wheel of Dharma.
저거 뭐야 무엇이야라 아니 가르치고 생각하는데 다 수수 담해받는 말이다 바나나 다들 주변이지 송여서 당고들 아니 이게 감정이 다 고쳐 다 상관을 내는 저거 그거 나서 또 왔다 나지 나라니 이 담을 하기 맞게체 발게 아니 저거 그러나 또 왔다 내니 순간에서
And the Gisela Younger something like Chuni.
어디 무슨 상관을 내지 아니 저거 그러나 어디 직제 이번에 그걸로 이 담을 맞게 돼서 발게 아니 저거 그러나 그래서 또 왔다 내니 순간에서
The petition to the Guru to turn the wheel of the Dharma may be performed in two ways. One may envision oneself as Brahma making the request to the Bhagavan to teach the Dharma, to turn the wheel of Dharma, or one alternately may view oneself as the Yidam, one's tutelary Buddha, and as the tutelary Buddha requests the Bhagavan to turn the wheel of Dharma. What remains related to turning the wheel of the Dharma, the request to turn the wheel of Dharma, will have to wait until next week. Any doubts you have now, any questions you'd like to ask, please raise them now, and we can discuss this during our Q&A.
Yeah.
Ani syarat ni buat ani sumpai kap dan dela. Di cerita ini ani tong ni kita ting sama di ani Chenmo ni syaribu topa kan sih kebare. At the time when the teaching of the Prajna Paramita Hridaya, the Heart Sutra, Chenmo taught the Dharma to Shariputra, and what followed in terms of the realization arising in the mind of Shariputra. Tadu di ani korenga di zambo gi gansa chigro ani dedu ani Shariputra da mogagi bu yang yore be ani tatugi ani karisa ani tendra ningogi do sungurbe la before Avalokiteshvara spoke before Shariputra had already achieved realization before the moment Avalokiteshvara teaches in the Prajna Paramita Hridaya. This happened when, at the time of the Buddha, when the Buddha had taught to the 5 close disciples, among whom was one known as Ashva. The Buddha Bhagavan sent Ashva to receive Moggalliyana and Shariputra. The Bhagavan said, go and receive Moggalliyana and Shariputra. Ashva greeted them, and they asked Ashva, who has seen the truth? And Ashva replied with the recitation of the Pratitya Samutpada Sutra, the Sutra of Dependent Origination. Reciting this, Shariputra gained his realization there.
대박 무슨 통하서 이제 나 되네 아니 그럼 되게 좀 되게 제가 죽으러 와 아니 제가 그래서 많이 좀 되게 파트는 다들 파트는 좀 되는 거기 이렇게 해서 그러면 이 얘기 좀 되게 설명도 좀 많이 그러니 뭐그 세를 보기 이제 제 많이 뭐라 다들 자책이 왜 오늘 좀 되게 자책이 왜
코코닉이 바로
분이 버리게 됐어요.
이거.
지금도 많이 많이 취하고 다들 쉬고 하고 다들 자대한 점들을 찾아서 어디서는 분이 하고 다들 찾는 점들을 찾아.
Ashvajit of the 5 close disciples, it was Ashvajit who spoke the Pratitya Samutpada Sutra to Mudgalyayana and Shariputra. And then it was spoken in the Sanskrit language as Ye Dharme tu Prabhave Tathagadevada Vijanjayunura Edmo Vadi Mahasramanai Swaha, the essence of the Pratitya Samutpada. And then Mudgalyayana and Shariputra continued their way to visit the Buddha, visited the Buddha Bhagavan, and as they did with Ashvajit there too, between themselves, Mudgalyayana and Shariputra, they wondered, should we first pay homage to Ashvajit or first to the Buddha Bhagavan? And they decided among themselves, as Ashvajit taught Pratitya Samutpada Sutra to us first, let us first pay homage to him and then the Buddha Bhagavan.
제가 분위기 다들 가르치는 차로 제가 좀 내대로 차 제가 가르치는 차를 해서 어디 가느냐 맨날 시험을 해서
Their reasons, Mudgalyayana and Shariputra's reasons for first paying homage to Ashvajit and then to the Buddha Bhagavan is for our reflection to inform our practice.
그래서 다 비주 한국 아주 양내치들 경식이 내다 차책이 내다 근데 주로 보면 한국라면 아니 관계를 좋지 그다음 우리 양내치도 어디 시험을 치고 그래서
First, whatever the practice of refuge, prostration, making offerings, first one performs these to the Guru and then to the Buddha Bhagavan.
그냥 가르치는 데 직업인데 너 가르치는 데나 남아매나 아니 산지 치다가 토베 그요마 난감해도 차고 제가 라마나 때는 운전수기 치다가 하기로 주고요 대신에 라마 때문에 남에 당기요 이거에서 유난 당기요 산지의 개처가 되는 그 자체가 쓰기요 그래서
Why is it so? Without the Guru, there's no course for the blessings and the path of the Buddha Bhagavan. They travel through the Guru, so the Guru is included first in the refuge and in the offerings.
제가 뭐 좋아하는데 제가 좋아하는 건데 셔리보 주상마들 때에 셔리보를 지어서 좀 가르쳐서 좋아 딱 제가 그런 멤버통을 너무 깨차래 이나야 좀된 대기 셔리보디 좀된 대기 로맥이 나는 셔럽초도 동거지 편하게 하자니 쟤는 세워 근데 도배하게 똑같이 어디서 뒤집게가 있는지 지난 뭐요 이제 좀 내대 셔리보디 좀 내대기가 로맥은 셔럽초도 되고 있나 어디 뭐시냐 된다 아니 좀 내대기 치기다음에 셔리보를 좋아하고 좀 예를 내게 좀 내대고 하면 띵이 좀 치기가 좋아하면 쉬워요 이 지중에 좀 내대기 띵이 치기가 해 어디지
Now to respond to the question, at the moment, Avalokiteshvara spoke the Prajnaparamita Hridaya in its profundity. What realization arose in the mind of Shariputra? Shariputra was already known as foremost in intelligence among the Buddha Bhagavan's disciples. None surpassed Shariputra in intelligence. For this reason, by the force of the Buddha's samadhi, the Buddha Bhagavan caused none other than Shariputra to put the deep, profound question to Avalokiteshvara, and then two, by the power of the Buddha Bhagavan Samadhi, Avalokiteshvara responded and the dialogue ensued. It was for the reason that Shariputra was unsurpassed in intelligence.
네, 점점 되겠다. 제가 무슨 이 가르침을 타탈 렉소 예처와 전에 렉소를 좀 타탈 치기도 어디다 좀 되게 시행은 못 숨어요. 제가 좀 치고 하나
Lower. And then
렉소 시작하시네.
and then in the final moments of the Prajnaparamita Hridaya, the Heart Sutra, the Buddha Bhagavan spoke directly. The Buddha Bhagavan speaking directly uttered these words, very good, O son of good family. It is exactly like that.
좀 되게 가다라 생기다가 얘네 소매가 제수마가 스카트를 이번 카메라 숨듯이
양기할 스카군 라우스인데
얘네 소매가
신의 수 올라서
생기다가 제수마가
제수 나면
어디 숨도 가다라 그리고 숨겨서
the Buddha Bhagavan's vachana, the word of the Buddha Bhagavan are of three kinds. That spoken through an interlocutor, spoken by force of the blessing of the Bhagavan, and the subsequent utterance of the Buddha Bhagavan. These three. Any others? Mena? Suji, yeah. Well, then if there are no other questions, then we begin our vacation.
Yeah.
Thank you. Geshe, I have a question. It is about well, it's three parts. But they're kind of connected. So this question about compassion fatigue. So I think this has more to do with the Thursday class, but also with Lamrim. So when we aspire to practice bodhicitta, and if we practice it in the right way, will there not be compassion fatigue? And when we get compassion fatigue, is it because we're still not practicing bodhicitta in its I guess the enlightened form, or like the way of bodhisattva would practice, because we get the fatigue because of self-grasping and obscurations and afflictions and self-grasping ignorance, because even when we're talking about just like basically just doing the practice of rejoicing for others, sometimes when you know you should be happy for somebody, you don't feel that happiness, or like, oh, I want to share that happiness with another person, because you were so, I think, exhausted from maybe having positive emotions even. And then the second part of the question is, what if a person has some sort of biological, physical, like a psychological hindrance to practice, like to show up and practice bodhicitta 100% of the time. So for example, if they're called to just even like be at a celebration to rejoice for somebody, but they feel like, oh, I'm so depleted of emotional energy. If I come, I won't be so happy. So then they don't go. I don't know. This is like very nuanced kind of thing, but it happens. And then I think that's all for now.
listen, then 다들 행성 딜랍이래 가기라 아니 닝세 망잡에 아니 나사 든든에 가기라 든들 요래 다니 닝세 케네 양내 양도 아니 닝세 숙침보 아니 케네 하마디 아니 베베 탕 체웨게 아니 네서 든들 아니 톡 용어디 아니 행성 가기라 요래 다 이 소리 닝제 키에네 하마델라 심 쿄와데 소소 모만네 장축기 심 수신도 마드베타 잡어르베 베나 장축기 심 양다바 키에나 심 쿄야다 항체야드네 메바차기로와 이르베 직제 다드네 다 녀몽당 아니 친진기 러기 왕기 장축 이 양다파르인데 안에 케 카포로와 말 녀몽당 친진기 러기 왕게 안에 장축 기sem케네 항체와다 셈쿄 근데 아니 요래
녀몽당 진지기 참주선 계획만 보치마
로시 말아 로시 말에 대담아데 아니 장축 기sem케네 바룰라 아니 신진기로다 아니 녀몽기 왕게 아니 장축기 셈데 아니 양다파 드럽 마투바 든르조그로와 야마나니 드럽이알라니 객치로와 맞아 다 아니 디단 제웨 아니 네수 가르 요레슬라나 다 제수 이랑 고아디 바로 미 시기 아니 제수 이랑 웹에게 자와 체난라 체네 소소기 제수 이랑 웹바 임바디 하고나야 아니 소르디 아니 케용이면도 가인선은 소소 탕체네 아니 가츠워디 케용이면도 라 이직제 아 어디 되게 걸라니 지워든지 라고요
장게 저거 한국들은 규조들다 인지기 왕기 아니 세는 딱 가유는 인지 체내 아니 간다 도래다 다 송도치 에시가 이 용식이 루규요래 아니 용식을 다 간다 수주기 시행하는 매트 수주고 지도나 셰비하고 휴밀 편도 시부지 않에 가져가는 수야고 제가 맞으면 수주 선바 탕체원 어디라고 하는 거 인지기 원이 간다라는 냠내 체내 네 다라고 땅에 용서 말했음 정규선 또 인지 또 이 용거를 했어 네이 인지 또 이 용해야 루규다 당시와 이를 해서
Responding to the first part of your question, there are accounts of great compassion that animated a person that in the end caused their utter exhaustion and slide into nihilistic despair. There are accounts of this. There are stories of just this. And this happens in the world in work that we undertake, where in the beginning we commit ourselves to others and work tirelessly for others. And then comes a moment when there's no acknowledgement of that work and one tires out completely. And then though one has developed the mind of enlightenment, in the end, one concludes it's of no use and abandons it. And there are such stories, and there is even, of course, that possibility.
Oh yes, 인지 슈츠부께오는 유마투아 인지를 한게다 인지를 체를 대마지 마중에 지는 이따 한테 인지 왕이 당을 좋아 르당와 되게 용되어 있는 인지 슈츠부 예배께나 아니 유튜브에 연구 말했어 근데 빼리 가서 빼나만도 마기 보기 한게 말이야 그 두자 제바에 강에 마기 쉐바 많이 있는 아마기 우리 땅 투마라 진짜 찍니도 유식으로 있는 것도 고고 우리 땅 투마라 그나시 인지 그런 게 오늘 동네에 제일 인지 생기들 때문에 깨서나 이제 그들을 땅 투야 그것도 이거 말하는 거지
Now, where it is possible, where the compassion is not there in its fullest entirety, where it is wanting in some respect, that we can imagine, well, a person abandoning the compassionate care they would show to others, unable to sustain it. But this is in cases where the compassion is not so great and so full and entire of itself in the fashion in which we find the compassionate care of a mother for her child. There, in most mothers, 98, 99%, there may be 1 or 2 or 3% who don't show this compassionate care, but those mothers are simply incapable of ever abandoning their child, that the child may be disobedient, may harm them. So where the compassion is truly present and of great intensity, then it isn't possible.
that's what I was when you were to change your watch over just you know, we are then another Makoma. Then chick each corner. I mean, but Mela was not a what young man would say, Kuram, using the young I'm a jailer. Then I put Yakuya Kizidi on the $100. This coming with the Posem Hombu with her, and teaching young men said, Tomisha, your husband.
And the second part of your question having to do with rejoicing, where we are now unfamiliar with, unaccustomed to, unhabituated to rejoicing, it's unimaginable. But with repetition, one time, a second time, with exercise, then one does in fact grow accustomed to rejoicing actually. And it is because in the beginning, it is so difficult to wrap one's head around rejoicing that it is counted among the practices of the bodhisattvas.
대부 정규성 세계 뛰어나 뭐 랑이 드라이브 드라마이 뭐 이해도 다 투어지 맞으나 인지 때문에다 잡았음에다 정규성 지락하고 깨투야 이거 말와 제가 아무 드라이브 이해도 다 투여기 그리고 야매 세대 거지 어디 당고 야매 개체부지 회배 야매 지고야기 드라이브 이해도 다 투여기 야매 차대 여래서 그렇지.
Now, to put it in a way that'll be easy to understand, great compassion that is authentic and sincere, is as great compassion animated by love, boundless love. And boundless love and great compassion together are the impulse to bring contentment to all and the impulse to part all from their sorrows. But this is inconceivable if there are classes of people enemies to us. If they remain enemies and we wish harm to them, they do not fall into those whom we love and show compassion toward. So then it is critical first, before the result of compassion and great love, which is bodhicitta, can ever arise, it is indispensable that first every adversary, perceived enemy, be transformed into one's friend, whom one cares for, and one achieves this transformation of all enemies into these friends through the practice of patience. But why? What is the rationale here? To a friend, we extend compassion and love. We are able to extend compassion and love. But why?
完了也不切松，也不切把它业以为自己或者这把这往死了。
Why? But because we recognize in the friend one who has done us some good, one who has helped us. They have helped us. They do me good. For this reason, they are my friend.
啊，那有些的业里有些的，然后他就是这个做事，然后把这个在的谈的那那结果的，我慢慢偏多一个，就慢慢偏多了。有些谈的业了搞切，有些的，然后有些的让有点说。
Put the same rationale behind every foe, behind every adversary, and recognize they have done me good. They do me good. They will do me good. No differently from my friend, but the same rationale behind them.
我也谈的谈了，年纪这么多的，像我公嘛多的，有些的年了，这个人他就是读不住，这个人基本上我来说，
Now get to them.
然了。
No.
像我公嘛多的，年纪这么多呀的，有些的年了，他人读不住的，有些这个人什么当来说。
And that which prevents us from extending love and extending compassion to that adversary, that foe, carry that over to one's friends.
我也是在本身什么当，如果什么当呢？但他的年龄或者就叫对呀，那他生的让你生的那么多岁了，年的那么多岁了，我都他妈有的在这头的。
Allah Yisla. The any probably the jadi sur in the kewati and the susan la par and the cup the mare.
这的啊，一年的这儿把这个叫什么？
No.
年的这儿这个叫什么？但这的那个叫我地当看到各个地人的年的把这个说了，有的。
The any jadi never kelkin yempati and it sur and the susan la cup euro.
这个。
Cup euro.
这么的，现在这的可能那个叫有些人或者什么公土嘛，是吧？
No.
他们给土要嘛，你是公土要嘛，是吧？
Allah.
公土面呢，年的把这个公土把它意思。 年的咱那个机会，咱那个机会东西，年的是了，那个忙个检查。
Never gets or
检查了，我嘛是吧？那个检查了，那个忙检查。现在那个检有些机会，那个检有些机关，看到有些机关什么当？
well. As one is able to understand that a friend is a friend to us because they extend to us care and concern and are good to us. What has prevented the perceived adversary from being friend to us is that they haven't been able to extend compassion and care to us. But they may extend compassion and care to us, just as the friend too may be incapable of extending compassion and care too. They are no different, the friend and the enemy.
哎，上面以前上面当的嘛都，差不多上面当的嘛都，就是上面拿了，网上用完那个嘛了，上面当的。 在老我嘛了，那边经验当，他们那边经验，你们那边这个几个几样，老我嘛了看同意这个，老的了看同意，看多几个几样，这什么当的呢？这个少了多少？
Now, this can be difficult to comprehend, but the rationale ought to be understood that harm done to us in the past, harm done to us presently, is the same harm done to us. Care and concern extended to us in the past and extended to us now are the same. Care and concern and benefit. That they are the same, the harm and the care and concern, that same harm and care and concern is shared by both the adversary and by the friend.
어떤 이제 사무장산 리미도 사무나를 팬토 찍고 있는 네 찍고 있는 사무를 깨지 시에는 소식 좀 내기도
네.
당초 보면은 미지 숨이 주었다는 아무도 제일 어떤 거는 좀 생각나는 거는 수치고 나고요.
아,
그래서 좋아하게 근데 제발요. 제가 대한 간다 주어지게 돼 있어. 간다 또 인생 사무 땅 아니 다 양내 제를 만들지냐. 내가 쓰는 게임하는데 요 말았어. 근데 그 인생 사무 땅 그거 나갈 걸 가지니 거기에 가지 니에 거기에 그러지 잘해. 사무 인생 사무 땅 아니 지내 자이는 니에 그 찍고 자이 뭐 찍고 얼마 아니면 또 이제 딱 양내 요 니네 제가 그래서
Now, in the monastery, in exchanges, in debate, posing a question, one slaps one's hands together and there's a loud clap. And then one responds with their answer, clapping one's hands, and there's loud clapping back and forth. And the sound of the loud clapping triggers a comprehension, an insight of some subtlety that were you just to hear the words, because the words are somewhat impenetrable, somewhat opaque, with the addition of the crack of the slapping palms, there's a comprehension that occurs that wouldn't otherwise. And so here we are with a rationale that's subtle, and it doesn't become immediately apparent to the mind in such a way that one feels a conviction in it because of its subtlety. And so in the monastery, when it's subtle, we slap our hands together so that the sound can assist us to penetrate something that is opaque. And so that here in this question, that the adversary and the friend are indistinguishable in terms of the harm they would do, the care they would extend. This is not, it doesn't necessarily cause in us an immediate response. It requires reflection for there to be any response elicited in us. This week, then, make this your deliberate practice. See the friend as the very individual who did harm you in the past, and see any foe as the very person who did extend to you care and concern. Make this a practice for the week and achieve some neutrality of mind. And this practice may be extended into the 3 times, the past, in the past. This was the care and consideration shown to me in the past. This was the harm that was done to me by these same individuals. And in the future, too, this will occur. And presently, too, the practice extends into 3 times. And so that the mind does achieve a neutrality and a feeling of neutrality, we dedicate the virtue of this lesson through our closing prayers.
Rangi jishin tobe lamji shura tewe changwe tabi rowe yigim pa seje ne jewe tenpa yukin zingi
Yamba rinjin choge ma jamba, chabjan nyambara gyurve shote. Yingje shembe yirab kyabayi, pende teje sewar jebar sho. Seje gyawe menjon chele, leju chanju lamge rinde gyang. Tabe namge yilam gade ji, gyawe zeba rindu gyongyurji. Amsa rube tuye ruje jin, gelgen seje meda neme. Sera kundu gyawe abayi, namda gamda jewa magyurji. Kamse teba chola shushu se, sujin kula tuba teye se. Tuden namge tatu ruje jin, tashi gyasu chogun gyagu. From my two collections, vast in space that I have amassed, from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all my lives, my Drishti. May I find the best of the paths of the complete teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by practicing. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings, with the points of the path as I have discerned them. May I hold Buddha's teaching for a very long time, with my heart going out with great compassion, in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread have declined. May I offer this treasure of happiness to aid all sentient beings. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted boundless peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished by a long time, by following the complete graduate path of enlightenment and the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all human and non-human beings that eliminate adversity, make things conducive for practicing the excellent paths, never be parted in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtues and practices, may he always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may winds of prosperity spread everywhere. Jinye sape gewandi, pendon drowa guna kang pendon. Kebara jesu lo zang rabari, tembe nimbo rindu seje jo. Kangre rawe kongwe shin kangde, pendon dewa mare jongwene. Sere dewan tintin katsoyi, chabe site barde tengyurju. Kudu sambo de yang de shin de, da gungi jesu tatu shir, gewa de da tamje ratu. Yusu shebe gewa tamje ge, mwa kama shudu mwa de, da ge gewe tawa de gungyam. Sambo shujim tatu ge, chanju sanjo rinpoche, ma ge panam ye giruchik. Gewa nyapa neba kune kundu pelwan. I dedicate whatever virtues I have overcome for the benefit of the teachings and of sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Father Shine forever. In the land encircled by snowy mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful sinners and tensing gods, please remain until cyclic existence is ended. Just as the brave Manjushri and Samantabhadra too realize things as they are, also I dedicate all these merits in the best way, that I may follow their perfect example. I dedicate all these roots of virtue with the dedication praised as the best by the victorious thus gone ones who were 3 times, so that I might perform the noble Bodhisattva's deeds. May the supreme jewel of Bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more.
你工作了那你同学你仍然没法你maybe你是第十名 Lessons. For 2 weeks, I'm going to speak the Dharma from space, and so yeah. But for 2 weeks, I'll be away, and the interpreting will happen through Zoom. Gisela will be here, and interpreting will be done over Zoom.
Remote location.
Remote location.
Just questions for you.
Oh, yeah. And the only difference will be at that time, if there are any questions, we'll probably pass around a microphone, or else you'll come up to this snowball here and make the question clear so I can hear you and then I'll interpret it.
I'm just telling you what you.
Oh, yeah. I'm John Chile, but come close and clap in my ear. Oh, yeah. Auspicious greetings to you all. Oh, yeah. Practice neutrality.